Video number 2 on answering all your questions. Since I already told the YouTube auditor to go fuck himself in the first video, we can just dive right into the questions this time. Next question from MrFinalPrestige. So with the 15 plus Republicans running for president, who do you think is going to end up against Hillbilly Clinton? I can tell you this right now. I know the ones for certain that won't be winning. The easiest way to answer this is to go through all the options one by one, starting with the candidates that have absolutely no shot. You have your crazy people that won't make it past the first week. Donald Trump obviously tops the list of crazy people, and he'll be eliminated very quickly. And there's going to be more questions later on Donald Trump, so I'm not going to get into too much detail about him. Ted Cruz's bullshit is only supported by the Tea Party. Even his own party, even the moderate Republicans can't stand him. So he's not going anywhere without the support of his own party. And then you have Ben Carson, who's all kinds of batshit crazy. You know, I have never seen someone so goddamn book smart. This motherfucker's a neurosurgeon, but be so dense at the same time. This guy doesn't stand a chance when it comes to debates, as his craziness will just take the fuck over. So those three right off the bat, they win out on the nutcase section, and they'll be eliminated just based on the fact that they're fucking crazy. Then you have minor names, people that just don't stand a chance against bigger names. People like Mark Everson, Jack Failure, they'll drop out before the debates even begin because they won't even raise enough money. Others who hold office positions, yet normal Americans won't know who the fuck they are. Those guys stand no chance. Lindsey Graham is one of those. John Kasich, if he ever decides to run, is going to be another one. But because they don't have the name recognition, they're going to lose out to some of the bigger names. Carly Fiorini, she was the former head of HP, Hewlett-Packard, but she won't last against the more recognizable names in the party. She's not as crazy as some of the other people, but the fact is she just doesn't have the name recognition. Then you have George Pataki. He hasn't done shit in politics in 10 fucking years. The last time he was in office was 2006 as the governor of New York. So he's out of the running pretty much immediately. Nobody's going to recognize a motherfucker who hasn't been in politics for over 10 years. Then you have Chris Christie from New Jersey. He stands absolutely no chance because his party won't even support him, much like Ted Cruz. He thinks being blunt will work for him, but I'll tell you right now, that Sopranos mentality, it only really appeals to the northeast section of the United States. The rest of the country is going to be turned off by that, and he stands no chance outside of the northeast. After that, you then have people who will put their foot in their mouth way too often and will be nailed during a debate one way or another. And that includes Rick Perry, who famously had that oops line during the last election. He was trying to name the 3 agencies that he would cut if he became president, and he couldn't remember the third one, and he sat up on a debate and he said, oops, really, that's what he did. He's going to be out. Bobby Jindal all but torched his chances a few years ago with his kindergarten-level retort of the State of Union address. Even his own party thought he was far too inexperienced to compete nationally, so he's not going to stand the chance because the party's not going to get behind him. Then you have Mike Huckabee, another politician who hasn't been in office for a very long time, and his comments almost always seem to say something stupid. He complains about rap music, yet he will have Ted Nugent's song about degrading women playing as his campaign music. I mean, that's just outright stupid, man. He'll be eliminated right off the bat. And then that will leave you with just 4 candidates who have declared and one who is yet to declare. Scott Walker of Wisconsin hasn't declared. On votes and notoriety alone, I think Scott Walker and Rin Santorum are going to be eliminated right away. And it's not because they did anything wrong. It's just because they don't have the publicity and the money of the top 3 candidates I still have to mention. So unlike the others that all have shit going against them, these 2 just don't have enough going for them in order to win the primary. I think they'll outlast all the prior candidates, but my problem is they don't have enough to beat the next 3 candidates. And that leaves Jeb Bush, Marco Rubio, and Rand Paul. Now, Bush is obviously the son and brother of the Georges. Every candidate, whether it's a Democrat or Republican, is going to paint him as an unpopular candidate based on his family. And they're going to say he is just like the other Georges. Personally, I think he could win the party's nomination, but he would get stomped by Hillary in the general election. So I can't imagine his party backing him for that reason. They want somebody who they think can beat Hillary Clinton, who's most likely going to be the Democratic nomination. But if you were to put Bush up against Clinton, there is no way in hell he would actually win the general election. So that leaves 2 candidates, Marco Rubio and Rand Paul. Marco Rubio has the most uphill battle of them all because one of the things he will campaign for is immigration reform, something his party has staunchly opposed Obama on, and at the risk of looking like hypocrites, Republicans are going to have a hard choice to make. Continue fighting against the reform and go against Rubio's stance, or change their position and back Rubio and risk looking like hypocrites. Essentially, they painted themselves into a corner on immigration reform, and if he wins the nomination, they're going to have a hard choice to make. One way or another, I think it's going to screw Rubio over because of this. Because he has a different opinion than his party on such a major issue, that's really going to put him in a horrible position when it comes to campaigning. He could win the nomination, but his party stance against him is actually going to hurt his chances. And that leaves who I guess will be the winner, Rand Paul. He's a conservative, which falls in line with the party. He's liked by the Tea Party, which will bring in a lot of money, and he hasn't said anything incredibly stupid or hypocritical that goes against his party. Ultimately, I think he's going to be the winner based on process of elimination. All the other candidates have something wrong with them in comparison to their party, in comparison to the primary election, so Rand Paul will be my option as to who will get the Republican nomination against Hillary Clinton. Next question from Fallen Recon 15. Loco, following the church shooting, many liberals are pushing to put a more firm grip on gun availability. Do you think that these liberals and Obama are going down the same path as Hitler did in a very strict gun control? Please explain. You know, my last question and answer session video, I talked about guns, and I had pretty much a 20-minute reply to the topic, and I can tell you right now, that line of thinking that you have, that you're already trying to convey that liberals want gun control, already shows you don't understand the point of their argument, and that just assumes it's all about taking guns away. That's what the NRA wants you to believe. That's what conservatives try to paint the picture as liberals' side of the argument. That fear-mongering of taking away freedom, taking away your liberty, is nothing more than a deflection of the point from the argument to which they have no rational counterpoint. Here's the reality. Both sides do not want criminals getting guns. Both sides do not want mentally unstable people to have a gun. Both sides do not want mass shootings to occur. That's something they all agree on. I don't think any intelligent person would think it's a good idea to let criminals get their hands on a weapon. But the problem is, it's so fucking easy for them to do so. Access to guns and gun availability is the problem. And it's not a problem with guns themselves. It's a problem with the distribution and the inventory issues that we have here in the United States. Well, I'm not going to get into my whole argument again because I did a whole video on that shit. The United States has gun violence issues, and we're in some bad company when it comes to our gun violence numbers. We fall in line with some of the poorest countries in the world with our percentages of gun deaths, and it's fucking horrible. Almost every other developed country has single-digit percentages when it comes to gun deaths. The United States, close to 30%. It's fucking embarrassing. We have a horrible problem with guns, and it really needs to change for the fact that we should not be this fucking terrible at it. The biggest reason is that our gun laws and the lack of gun access laws give criminals a much easier chance to get their hands on a weapon when they shouldn't. Now, case in point, I live here in New York City. We have shootings that occur on a weekly basis minimum. Of these shootings, which are usually gang or poverty related, whatever the case may be, the overwhelming majority of these guns came from outside New York State. These animals are not able to get their hands on a gun legally here in New York because we don't let them. We have restrictions in place to make sure they don't get access to these guns. So what do? They get them from out of state. They go to Pennsylvania, they go to Georgia, they go to Virginia, they create gun rings who gain access to weapons legally in other states, but then illegally bring them here. It's not hard to set up a gun fence in another state and transport firearms. Undercover operations have shown how easy it is to gain access to weapons and ammo in states that have lax gun law access. You know, these cocksuckers aren't getting their guns from New York. They're getting them from other states, but committing crimes with them here. They find legal ways of getting their guns in other states, and those ways would normally be illegal here in New York. That's always going to be the issue, and that was part of my issue with guns. When you have lax laws that allow normal citizens easy access to weapons, you have to realize those same laws are also allowing criminals easy access. For every law that gives a responsible owner access, it gives an irresponsible owner or criminal easy access as well. Now, I'll give you the best analogy as to why we need to reevaluate our gun issues. When you go to airports now, right? How thorough is the screening process? You have metal detectors, you have body scans, pat-downs, removing your shoes, no phones, no metals, or whatever the hell it is. Why do we do this? For our safety, right? 99.9% of people that go through airport security have nothing dangerous. No threat to anybody on a flight, even though they'll take your fucking nail clipper from you. But we put all citizens through a rigorous screening process to ensure their safety. Is it convenient to wait in line for 20 minutes to a metal detector? Absolutely not. But could it potentially save passengers from a terrorist plot? Abso-fucking-lutely. So, we tolerate the screenings. We accept that as part of our ritual now to flying safely. However, what happens if one airport has lax security screening? What happens if that one airport has no screening at all and just lets everyone on board without a safety check? If a terrorist wanted to do something horrible, they would find the holes in that security flaw and they would get on that flight to cause harm. Everywhere else has their shit together, but that one fucking airport that decides that rather than offering safety, they want convenience. They want speed over precaution. So, let's say someone gets through that lax security. Let's say they get a device on a flight and they decide to detonate that device once they land at another airport. Because if they do it in flight, all you're doing is taking out people on the flight. But if you do it at a terminal, you have a chance of taking out workers, you have a chance of taking out people in the terminal. You could kill more people at a terminal than you could with a flight over the fucking ocean. That one scumbag finds a way to get through lax security, but he decides to cause damage somewhere else. That's what's happening in the hardest hit crime cities. The guns are not coming from places with maximum security, but they're coming from minimum security places. It's not about the guns themselves. It's about tying up all the loopholes that give access to these criminals, that give access to these animals, and allow people to just randomly skirt all the laws we have in place. But again, the NRA and conservatives avoid that line of argument by stating that it's a direct assault on their gun liberties. No, it has nothing to do with the actual gun. It has nothing to do with your gun rights. It's about the gun access. That will always be the main problem. Next question from Sarcasm. What is your opinion about the FDA trying to regulate vaping, imposing taxes, basically treating them the same as tobacco? Now, I'll tell you this right now, and I know exactly why the FDA is doing it. Years ago, when tobacco was made legal and was being sold, and nobody did their research on how the effects were of tobacco, the government realized their mistakes. They allowed a product that not only kills the user, but could potentially kill anybody that is around the user. So with secondhand smoke and shit like that, they wanted to make sure that this time around, when it comes to another smoking product, that they make sure to at least put some regulations in place and then allow that to be alleviated in the future. Before, when tobacco just came out, there was no rules, there was no regulations. And much like prohibition, where they said, okay, now we're going to take all this shit away, there was just no way to take back everything that tobacco had. It was so ingrained in the American culture that it was almost impossible to put restrictions on because people got so addicted to that shit. So when it comes to vaping, I understand why the FDA is trying to regulate it. I understand why they're trying to treat it like tobacco, because the fact is, when tobacco was allowed to have full reign, it caused hell with cancers, emphysema, any kind of breathing related illnesses. All that shit happened because they didn't have enough research. So instead of the FDA going out and doing the research and holding off and making it completely legal, they're going to rule it as tobacco. Now, as time goes along, they have the ability to alleviate some of those restrictions. They have the ability to say, you know what, this is not as unhealthy as tobacco. So as far as I'm concerned, I personally agree with it. And the reason why I personally agree with it, I can't stand tobacco. I hate the smell. I hate being around a smoker. As soon as I smell cigarette smoke, I lose my appetite. When I smell like cigar smoke, that shit gets me ill to my stomach. I can't stand it. I can't being around it. Now, if somebody wants to smoke in their own fucking personal space, fine. But as soon as you start blowing that shit in the air, now you're invading my space. You're invading my fucking health, and I can't stand the smell of that shit. So for the FDA to say that we're going to regulate some vaping, because obviously it does have some smoke related, it does have some vapors that come out and that invades other people's space, I have no issue with that. The fact is, even if it's healthier, even if it's safer than tobacco, I don't want to have to smell someone else's hobby. Bottom line. Next question from Epiphany Dude 1015. Hello, my mellow motherfucker. That's one way to say hello to somebody. Anyways, I've subscribed to hear your Black Ops 2 rants, and I think you've gotten angrier since then, so congrats on that. My question is, your rants seem to range anywhere from 7 to 20 minutes, and usually somewhere in between as of late. They seem structured in a sense and have a distinguishable beginning, middle, and end, so I was wondering if you script your rant somehow, or if somehow just belt that shit off the top of your head, and could you elaborate on that? Now, I'll explain this. A lot of people ask me, how do I do my commentaries? I've seen that question before. Normally, I don't answer, how do I do my commentaries and shit like that, but I'll give you guys some insight as to how it works. When it comes to any video that I do, the only video that is 100% scripted is Mission Impossible. And Mission Impossible is the only video that I have to, because I have to hit each and every point. I have to make sure that all of my talking points and all the commentary flows with what's going on in the background and shit like that. And obviously Mission Impossible is a whole skit, so you do need to write that one out. But when it comes to rant videos, when it comes to like my longer videos, I don't write anything out in particular, but I do have notes. One important thing that I always have with me is I sort of have bullet points on what I want my talking points to be. So for example, if I'm going to do like a rant, a 20-minute rant on Destiny, if I'm going to do a 20-minute rant on Call of Duty, I might have a sticky note, or I might have like my computer open with some points that I want to talk about. Like for example, Destiny has that asshat Luke Smith that had that interview a few weeks ago. I had a bullet point to make sure that I talked about that. I had a bullet point to make sure that I talked about the pricing and shit like that. I don't have anything written out unless I have like statistical facts. Like if I need to go back and reference something like FBI statistics or monetary statistics, I will write that shit out, because obviously I want to relay accurate information. But as far as what I say in my videos, that's all off the top of my head. I have bullet points as to make sure that I touch on the topic, but everything that you hear in the rant, everything that you hear in my videos, that does come off the top of my head. I make sure that I touch on certain points, but at no point do I script an entire video in order to put out the content. Now, I will say this, I do take a couple of takes in order to put together a video. There are going to be times where I start talking, I make a mistake, I make an error, I stop that shit and I cut up the commentary. And if you listen closely, almost every single video I make, you can hear the cuts in the action. You can hear exactly where I stopped the point and started a new sentence or some shit like that. That happens in every video. And that's mainly because of how the commentaries actually work. Obviously, if you talk, you get tongue-tied, you have an issue, you need to breathe, cough, whatever the case may be. There's going to be some breaks and shit like that. But nothing that I post outside of Mission Impossible is scripted at all. Next question from Horton Hits a Hebrew. Really, dude? That's your fucking name? What are your views on political correctness in recent years? You have that fucking name and you're gonna ask about political correctness? Holy shit, man. Tell me, he wants to know, do you think it's gone too far to the point of being a threat to our well-being? A threat to our well-being? Really? You really think political correctness is a threat to our well-being? Alright, man, we gotta talk about this shit. I want people to understand something first. For years, if people do things a certain way, and just because it's always been done that way, doesn't mean it's correct. I mean, that's not how shit fucking works. We had slavery for 300 years ago because it's always been done that way. Women had no rights to vote because it's always been done that way. Did it make it right? Of course not. So the moves political correctness aren't about threatening well-being for some reason. It's usually trying to fight for equal rights for those who didn't have equal rights in the first place. Case in point. How many of you use a gay as a derogatory term? How many of you will sometimes call someone a faggot or a retard? In other words, I'm going to insult you by putting someone else down, by equating that group to someone I feel is inferior to me. You're a faggot, and that means you're a lesser human being than I am. You're a retard, which means you're lesser of a human being than I am. Political correctness tries to show how fucking stupid and wrong this is. Being born with retardation doesn't make someone less of a human being. It's something that was out of their control. Does that make them deserve less respect than you? Of course not. So why the fuck is it used as an insult? Is being gay an equation to not being respected? Of course not. As much as homophobic people want to believe this, it doesn't make you any less moral or immoral than someone else. Being black meant you had to be a slave 250 years ago, and we look back now and we see how inhumanely incorrect that was. Political correctness isn't about censorship or removing individuality. It's about treating people with the same respect afforded to everyone else. It's not about making sure every kid gets a trophy. It's about making sure every kid has an equal chance of competing for that trophy. It's fixing the historical wrongs because people think it's always been done that way is an excuse for intolerance, injustice, bigotry, hatred, you name it. It's always been done that way is never going to be an excuse in order to put someone down besides you. Next question from Wolf12 King. Since we all know there are those popular cunts at high school that are pretty much popular only because all the guys at school want to fuck them and no other good reason, what would you say is your best memories of some popular fuck making a complete ass of themselves? I'll tell you right now, I had to think about this shit. I can't remember for the life of me what the fuck happened in high school. And I'll tell you right now, it's not for any other reason other than it's been a long time ago, but I was one of the athletes that was always on the damn sports team. So when it came to all the drama in the classrooms and shit like that, I didn't pay attention to it. I didn't pay attention to anything that went on outside of what was going on the baseball field or football field and shit like that. So every time that something went down in the school, I was the last one to know about it. Sure, there was some drama and I can't remember off the top of my head, you know, because obviously it's been so fucking long ago, but I'll be honest, I can't remember a damn thing other than what happened on a baseball field back in the day. Next up, Camper5034. Happy 4th of July. Goes to show you how long it's taking me to answer these shits. So he wants to know, what do I think of Metal Gear and the new Recon or Ghost Recon Wildlands or whatever the fuck it is. And I'll tell you right now, obviously I'm going to get Metal Gear Solid 5. I've gotten all the Metal Gears before that. I'm going to get this one. However, it's starting to look fucking crazy. I know that Konami's going through all this shit with Kojima and whatnot, and they're basically going to sell off the product or whatever the fuck's going to happen and shit like that. But from what the game started to what it is now, it's gone through so many fucking changes. The story's almost impossible to follow. It's really impossible to explain to someone who's never played the fucking game. So I'm really hoping, as much as I don't want to see the end of it, I'm really hoping this is the end of the series. Now, I loved Metal Gear Solid 4, and I thought that was a perfect, fantastic finish to the series, but of course, they had to go out and create that revengeance crap, whatever the fuck it is. Now we got Metal Gear Solid 5, which is another flashback into, oh god, man, listen. Just end the series. Let it go out peacefully. Let it go out with the glory it deserves, with the satisfaction it deserves, because right now you're just running that shit into the ground. As far as the Ghost Recon Wildlands or whatever the fuck it is, all I remember was the preview that we saw at E3 and whatnot. Looked good. Looked decent. I didn't see anything terrible about it other than the fact that you can obviously do missions different ways or whatever the hell it is. You could do stealth, you could just bust through the front door, whatever the fuck it is. So I do like that concept. It's just a matter of seeing whether or not they put all that together in a game. Because let's be honest for a second. This is Ubisoft. They have a history of making up these fucking trailers, showing you shit, Watch Dogs in particular, showing you how shit is supposed to go, yet it doesn't actually apply to the actual gameplay. So we'll see what happens when the game actually comes out, but for now, it does look pretty decent. Video 2 is now complete, and tomorrow's video is going to start with the questions that came over at Prestige Gamer. So for those of you who sent your questions there, right off the bat, I'm going to get into those responses so you see those questions. So as always, rate, comment, subscribe, and all that good shit, and I'll see you guys in tomorrow's video.